In this week's First and 20 podcast, we're going to have my friend Matt Farrell as our guest. Matt and I have known each other for many, many years, starting out with the USOC, and has a great story that has ended up right now as the CEO of USA Figure Skating, coming off an impressive games result in the Milan Games. Listen to how his desire to be in sport, failed initially, but then it has created an incredible journey to where he is today. All right, let's go to the show.
Welcome to the First and 20 podcast, the podcast for college students trying to get into sports by talking to those in it. Here's your host, Steve Rockel.
Hey, welcome to this week's podcast, First and 20 podcast. I'm your host, Professor Steve Rockel. I have a dear friend and incredible sports guy, Matt Farrell, who's joining me. We have dipped our toes on a lot of things similarly, and we have a lot of just interactions over years. And he's doing some exciting stuff. So thank you, Matt, for being part of the show.
That's awesome. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I was a guest on his podcast. So it's a little bit of payback. So I appreciate him being on here. So, it's very clear right now, you work with USA Figure Skating. We will get that to a moment. But if you can quickly just go back into kind of where'd you go to school, what'd you graduate in? I'm trying to think here. And then talk about kind of your progression, right? I think that's kind of where we met at the USOC back in the day. But I'd love to hear about that and kind of give that kind of road or that journey.
Yeah, it started, I grew up in a small town in Kansas, Pittsburgh. I went to the University of Arkansas, tried to walk on the baseball team, and that didn't work. And turns out it just wasn't good enough. And that's actually what prompted my initial career in sports. So stayed in school and finished at Arkansas in 92 with a broadcast journalism degree, worked what was then called sports information in the women's athletic department, and had an incredible mentor there in Bill Smith. And that's what really kickstarted and was the catalyst to an entire career working in the sports business ever since then. And so since then, it's really just been a mix of mostly the Olympic sports, an early communications job at USA Swimming, early, and this is funny to talk about, invention of the internet days with the USOPC. Had a chance to come back to USA Swimming in a chief marketing officer role. And from there went to the Golf Channel. COVID thought otherwise of how that was going to go. Created a marketing and consulting business. And worked with a lot of Olympic clients and a baseball technology client called Bat Around before really landing at US Figure Skating nearly to the year.
Yeah, and you just came off of a very successful Winter Games.
It was
right?
It was mind blowing. You think about really, 2 gold medals and a silver medal for the team gold, Alyssa Liu with the individual gold, and then Chalk and Bates dance silver. But just the power in pop culture and popularity of a figure skating gold medalist even more so seems like on the women's side of Alyssa Liu's hanging with, pop stars, getting invited to present awards with Taylor Swift and, going to award shows. It's just been mind-blowing of how receptive American fans are and world fans are to just the success of figure skating. So it's been an embarrassment of riches, and I just inherited an incredible roster and success.
Yeah, because, if you look at the games, the storylines for figure skating were very popular, right?
It's huge. Even on the men's side, where Ilya Malinin was a huge, huge story. And that didn't go exactly as he thought or hoped, but still a major storyline and how he recovered from it and handled it, to, the 3 women that we branded as the Blade Angels were a huge story, and dance was a big story. So yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and especially after the unfortunate accident that took the lives of a lot of the up and coming, coaches and
that was about a little
right?
over a year ago, almost hitting an anniversary of a year and a month or less leading into Milan. And just the just the toll that took, just in terms of 27 lives in the figure skating community and the emotional toll of people feeling that even today and certainly in Milan, it was very heavy. And then having Max Naumov on the team, whose parents were a part of that, was still just crushing to the skating and Olympic community.
So, as the CEO of USA Figure Skating, what do you think is the what defines a really good games for you, right? In terms of, yeah, there's medals to be won, there's storylines to be said, but for your day to day, or here's your responsibility, what are you trying to do for the organization?
There's probably a little bit of just, I mean, quick background of what a national governing body is. We're so used to in sports of like minor league teams, professional teams in these other sports, but success for us certainly has to do with performance. We're unapologetically wanting to win and win medals. But for us as an organization, what comes out of that is equally important of A, how you represent yourself, of course, but how does that translate into sometimes kids, sometimes adults getting on ice and trying to learn the sport for the first time? And there's a huge halo effect of the Olympics. And especially after Alyssa won, we're hearing from skating rinks and skating clubs around the country that they're seeing anywhere from 20 to 30% growth from previously just in participation in places like Kansas and Alabama and Albuquerque, New Mexico, and not just the big cities and not just the coast. There was a headline in the Albuquerque Journal about a skating class of 300 people filling up like that. And so that's just as much of success and plays every bit a part of it as standing on the podium for what we do as an organization. I tell people that an NGB is kind of like, imagine if Major League Baseball also ran T-ball and Little League. And that's what an NGB does. And we're a very different animal in that. So the two work together.
Now, because you said this, I mean, I would assume that this membership, right, into US figure skating generates revenue that helps the NGB to operate, correct?
Yeah. If you look at us like a pie chart of where revenue comes from in the organization, typically, like NGB is wider than US figure skating. That can be 40, 50, 60% of your organization's revenues, those kids on skating teams or skating clubs. For us, it's in that 40% range. So along with philanthropy and sponsorship and, support from the USOPC, those are the major buckets. But people look at us and think we're all about the Olympics. What do you do the other 3.5 years? Ha ha ha. But, really at the core, we're a grassroots youth sports organization.
Yeah, absolutely. When we let me think about this. You talk about. I remember when you were CMO over at USA Swimming, you had the same kind of reaction. Like after the Olympics, you saw this influx of memberships, right? And I think that's a big driver in all of this. Is not, in a sense, the gold, the medals push new people or pull new people into the sport, which
Absolutely.
then you can be a part of, right?
Yeah, we saw that at swimming where, kind of typical year during the time, and this is, call it the 2010s. Uh, Typical growth might be 2 to 3% a year. During an Olympic year, it might go to 7%. But there were some years where, there was Michael Phelps and Missy Franklin and a Ryan Lochte and Natalie Coughlin. There's this full roster. There was one 13% year bump after that, and it would be 7 to 11% of like seeing that on TV, knowing that that might be a sport for me and being willing to give it a try.
And going back to figure skating traditionally is probably the most popular sport for Winter Olympics, right? And then it's hockey. I think and then speed skating, I believe.
Yeah, I think you'd probably have a good arm wrestling argument between, figure skating and hockey on that. And then there's certainly alpine and some other things that are just like on this upward trajectory, such as snowboard. But, really just the on ice sports tend to be the
Yeah. I mean, great storyline for hockey this year too. So for both
yeah.
men and women. So It was exciting for, those days for these games as well. What was your experience in Milan this time around? Like were your responsibilities when you were there?
So, coming into this role, Milan experience was great. Everything from the athletes, we had a hospitality house set up that was the first time. There was a combination of US figure skating, USA hockey, and US speed skating that we called the Winter House. So, my job going there could be days that you're watching skating and don't have a ton to do. And then there are days where, you might just get hit with something that's like you wait, you're bored, you're twiddling your thumbs, and you got to act right now. And sometimes that's on the field of play. Sometimes that's maybe dealing with music, and so it's a little bit reactive when you're there on site, and really just being prepared to go into action, make decisions where you have to support. And I don't mean the Olympic team. Of course, we support them, but our staff team around the team, be there for anything that they need. And so you're just kind of a shortstop when you go there of like just be ready for anything and when it comes. And so that part went great. And this winter house that we created was really our hub and our home as a place for families, friends, partners, donors. And that ended up being the gathering place, nightly award ceremonies where you bring the team in. And so just the combination of all of those things just made a great experience.
Awesome. Let me move to a couple of different experiences that you had. You were with USA Swimming, great time there, and then you moved to the Golf Channel, right? And went into the World Long Drive. Fascinating time, right? You talked about COVID kind of killing that a little bit, and then you went into individual consulting.
Yeah.
And out of that, it sounds like Bat Around kind of came out of that, as well as some NIL stuff that you and I worked on. Talk about that kind of journey. You were at a really, I would say, on the outside, hey, you were a CMO of a pretty large NGV, one of the larger ones. You've kind of transitioned, but that journey has taken a couple of different like approaches. I'd love to know your attitude about that and kind of what you were thinking throughout that thing. Not saying it's a bad or a good thing, but
Yeah.
it's a journey, right? And want to help students understand work as a journey.
It's a great word for it because maybe to reset at USA Swimming, I had been the CMO for 13 years and I loved it. Great organization, great culture, but I just had an internal clock ticking. Like, okay, it's just time. And so took this role with the Golf Channel, which was designed to be incredibly entrepreneurial of how do you create golf themed programming for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday nights when every tournament in the world is Thursday through Sunday. So how do you program these other nights? And World Long Drive was the start of it. And I planned for that to be my forever home. And let's retire with that. And the lesson in it is sometimes you have this vision of my career is always just going to be step up, step up, step up, step up. And then you get slugged in the gut. And it doesn't happen that way. And so COVID came along. The Golf Channel started moving its operations from Orlando to Connecticut, and you get slugged in the gut. And you're like, oh my gosh, I'm still on the rise career wise. And you get knocked down to a lot of pegs. And so I created this consulting business, which was complete. It was a resume filler back in a time when gaps in your resume seemed more noticeable than maybe they do today with COVID. I was like, I'll just try to make a couple bucks, look for my next job. And then the consulting thing started to work, but you're rebuilding everything you work for financially. And that's hard. It worked out and took some time to get rolling, but it was a real lesson in humility in life of chasing titles. We all want to get paid for what we do, but chasing money doesn't always go as you planned. And like, wow, I've got to reinvent. And that's a lot of what that was.
How fun was it to work on an entrepreneurial thing like Bat Around?
Gosh. So Bat Around is a product that think like a golf simulator, but for baseball. And we got 2 MLB deals done where you can play our game at Coors Field in Denver and at Tropicana Field with the Tampa Bay Rays. But that was just an idea that came from, former player and manager Clint Hurdle. How can we really incentivize the strategy of hitting, but make it in a modern way of like taking something that's truly whiteboard and building it into a business and building the legal structure, the governance, the intellectual property, the trademarks, the kind of the messaging and the strategy. That was like the sweet spot of, I felt like everything that I had done, and I consider myself a generalist, and I mean that in a good way. I'm not a specialist in many of these, but in that entrepreneur land, being able to do 20 different things to get something to come together was like the perfect alignment of my background. And then it came a time where, like, wow, they really need somebody much more specialized in gaming than gamification, I should say, versus gambling gaming. And this job came up, opportunity was the dream of a lifetime. And also knowing that they actually needed a different skill set than the original, co-founder, entrepreneur to get something built. And it reached a point where it just needed something different. And this came along and just was fortuitous.
It's great. So I remember I sent you a couple of pictures. You wanted me to go to the Cubby Bears, I think.
That's right.
Here's hey, can you take
Yeah,
pictures
getting
of
in
what they
Wrigleyville
have?
is still a goal.
Okay, here it is. Because I know you wanted to go into some bars and some other places, like, and kind of build that brand in different ways. So I remember that. That was kind of
It's a
fun.
fun product. It's a great training product. So yeah, I'm still very bullish on it, and they're thriving. And so I'm still on the board, still have some shares, still cheering it on.
Good for you. So, we've been talking about kind of your sports background, your specific one, but interesting enough, it's not just you, it's your whole family basically has, sports kind of in there and, kind of starts with your wife, really. Like, can you tell me a little bit about her background?
Yeah, really. I mean, the punchline, but my wife Michelle Dussert is a silver medalist in the '84 Olympics in gymnastics, and so she was part of that team with herself and Kathy Johnson and Tracy Talavera and Mary Lou Retton and Kathy Johnson, if I didn't say her. And so it's just such a great history in sports. And now she works at the USOPC, the US Olympic and Paralympic Committee. Sports has just been integral to our whole lives and how we're wired. But I mean, I've worked in the business, but I'm still a plus one to most events we go to, being with her, which is
Yeah.
good.
And then Abby was one of my students, right? And she
So our
was a wheelchair.
oldest daughter, Abby, as you said, she works in sports. She actually works here at US Figure Skating. She worked here first. I came in after her in a communications role, which is how I started. Played wheelchair hoops at the University of Illinois. Had a great career playing wheelchair basketball there, and obviously crossed paths with you being her professor. And then you and I knowing each other from at least 2002, if not before, just kind of brought all these worlds together. And our youngest daughter, Zoe, she lives in Oregon and has taken much more of a art and music path to thing. And she didn't get that from either one of us, but plays in a band and does art and just has a creative side that none of us have. So really, we all kind of play our part.
No, it's great. It's so funny. You've been around a lot of different types of sports. What would you say in terms of the skill sets? Like, what are things do you feel like students need to know about today's sports and if they want to get involved in it?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, for me, it was a very generalist path, as we talked about, kind of rooted in communications. And I put that journalism degree to work, I feel like every day, just in how to communicate. But, I think there's what I've seen with students that they get very fixated on what school should I go to? What should I major in? And the academics of the world kind of maybe disagree with me at times, but I'm like, don't don't sweat it. It's okay. You can go to small school USA, you can go to Arkansas, you can go to Illinois and still succeed in this business. Your experiences that you do along the way are going to define you more. And I've found, and I don't say this to be funny or self deprecating, rarely the smartest person in the room of anything that I ever do. But I think I've done a really good job of building relationships and trust over the years. And that's where so much of your success comes, in those relationships and that network that you've built. And if you graduated with, I thought I was going to major in political science. And then I woke up one day and I'm like, what am I going to do with that? I don't want to go into politics, but no matter what you major in, you'll find that sports you can really adapt. You can be super specialized in data analytics, or sport performance, or marketing and sales, or you can have roles that don't really pertain directly to sports, like finance and HR and accounting. There's just so many different routes into it that you feel like, oh, I've got to be an expert in football, basketball, swimming, gymnastics, figure skating. You don't, in many ways. I mean, there's just so many avenues into it.
Sure. You had mentioned earlier about networking. We all kind of know networking is such a key piece. What would you tell a student who feels like they don't have a network? They want to work in sports. They have no network, a junior or a senior. How would you encourage them to start their journey?
Yeah, I mean, maybe one quick frame of reference is, I'm older, but out of 8 jobs that I've had in my career, 1 came from submitting a resume. All came from my network. Now, you still have to know your stuff. You still have to do the job. It's not a who you know thing. But what I found is, like, people in your community, and let's take University of Illinois, for example. If I'm an Illinois student or an Arkansas student, the receptiveness of people in this industry who also went to Arkansas, who are willing to take a 15-minute informational interview with a student who comes from Arkansas. Man, I love that place. And I bet you do the same for somebody who went to Illinois. The same can be true for, maybe it's your hometown, maybe it's your sport, it's certainly your college. But I've always been a huge, huge advocate of the informational interview, where a student just reaches out to someone, maybe they're a friend of a friend or went to my college, say, hey, can I have 15 minutes of your time? I want to ask you about your path and your journey. And the student does that. In my opinion, they're not asking for anything at this point. They're not pitching themselves. They just want to meet somebody. And as you can see in this podcast, our gift for gab is great. And anybody who wants to take the time to ask us about ourselves, that feels good. And we want to share that. And we're more receptive than people think. Like, don't get intimidated by somebody's title. If an Arkansas student or somebody that one of my daughters knows wants 15 minutes of time to get on the phone or a Zoom, 99 times out of 100, we're going to try to make that work.
Well, and you talked about the informational interview, which I totally agree on. What would you think is the key to making those times as successful as possible for a student?
For a student, I would be very diligent I am a believer in LinkedIn. It gets trashed it has its downsides like any social network, but it's a necessary evil. It's taking over for resumes. So you got to build that up. And then you just really want to start with a really clean, professional note to people of, my name's Matt. I want to be involved in this business. I noticed that we both have X in common. I would love to learn more about your job. 15 minutes, no pitches. And then just when you get it set up, be respectful, be on time, stick to that 15 minutes. Most of the time people talk more, and just be very courteous. And the next thing you know, the networking of those jobs, they're going to be an advocate for you. And then try to have 2 or 3 follow-ups that don't need anything. Steve, hey, thanks. I appreciate your time. I noticed this article about the Cubs in Wrigleyville building a new bar that you talked about on your podcast. I thought you might be interested in it. Just have some natural touch points versus, hey, Steve, we talked 6 months ago. Got any job openings? That's what you're really asking, but you just kind of do it in a relationship building way as opposed to hammering it over the head.
I love that answer. And so let me give you this scenario. Let's just say that you were hiring a coordinator, somebody at USA Figure Skating. You find 5 different people. In those 5 resumes, they all qualify to do what I'd call the operational parts of that job. What are you looking for on top of that? What are the decision-making points or the things that will go, I like this person. This is the person that I think makes most sense. With everything else the same, in terms of skill set?
That honestly, for me, that is an easy one because I'm huge on culture and fit. And so many people can do the job. I'm probably looking through my network to see if I have any connections to vet you because I don't want to hire people cold like anybody else does, first and foremost. But if you sat in an interview with me for a job, I'm probably not sitting there going, tell me about a time you failed, Steve. If you were a tree, what tree would you be? I'm probably not doing that. I'm probably just trying to have a conversation of, do I like you? We have a few difficult people in our office. Do I think you could actually handle working with them? Would your peers accept you? I'm looking for culture and fit, if much is not more than skills.
Great answer. I would agree with that answer completely. See, let's get to the next one is I look at the NGB world in many ways as a great place to get your foot in the door with sports. NGBs are located all across the countries. And if you don't know what an NGB is, it's a national governing body. So USA Figure Skating oversees all of, figure skating in the United States, also manages the Olympic selection process, blah, 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 all those things. In terms of kind of getting your foot in the door, what would you tell students to do in order to use the NGB route to help them kind of launch their careers?
I think first you have to be open to an NGB. Some people don't know what NGB stands for. They go to school thinking I'm going to work in minor league baseball, or I want to work for the Broncos or the Bears. And so it's first it's a mindset shift of, oh, would I actually be open to what a national governing body does? And so then you kind of realize that the way we're set up of the Olympics and this youth piece is very different structurally than going to work at a minor league team. So yes, you find jobs on the Teamwork Onlines of the world and in places like that. But the USOPC even has a job section that I always Google it more than navigate to it, just called Team USA affiliated careers. And you kind of get this little bit of a lesser known job board that I don't think is that prevalent to people versus going to Teamwork Online, and be willing to kind of take that flyer of a really unique experience in the sports business that doesn't look like the stereotypical going to work for a professional sports team. And that works for some people and it's not the vibe of others. And I get that, but it starts with that mindset shift of, I've never really thought about, would I be a good fit at USA Volleyball or Taekwondo or triathlon? And so that's probably where it starts.
Question: does USA Figure Skating, do they do internships? I don't know.
Occasionally, they tend to be a little more sport related, meaning you're coaching or something that's focused more on the sport. In my year here, that's something we hope to get going, is a little more of a formulaic on internships, but the USOPC offers great internship programs and some of the other sports do. So it's still on the list to get that developed for marketing comms and more non-figure skating specific internships.
I'm gonna switch it up a little bit. I only have 2 questions left here. Tell me a time or a story that you think is indicative of your entire sports experience to date.
That's a good one. I'm going to give you one theme with 3 examples, and it won't be as long as you think it is. I'm like, oh my God, he's going to talk forever. But the theme is knowing when to pivot and when to getting cut from walking on the baseball at Arkansas was a smack in the face. I'm like, oh, now what am I going to do? I love sports, so I want to go that direction. Literally being involved in a communication role when the internet and social media was created was an aha moment of, I don't know where that's going, but it's something, and I better start placing chips over there. And then the other one, which we talked about, is when you get hit with adversity and things end and you get a little bit rattled and how you really reinvent yourself. And so I think knowing when to jump, sometimes a better job is a better job, knowing when to pivot with what's going on. I'd be certainly, if I was in sports as a young person today, I'd be looking at the data analytics side of the sport. I'd be looking at gaming and gambling. I would be looking at what is AI going to do in sports and be thinking about, gosh, what are those not just industry, but global trends that are going to impact sports and where do I place my chips?
That's great. So I'll finish up. If somebody wants to do an informational interview with you, like what's the best route?
LinkedIn is a great place. That allows me to quickly just kind of see where you are, where school is. And I do try to remain active on there and keep up with things. So that's the best start. And you can always find me through US Figure Skating as well.
I think you said something that I wanted to finish off on is this concept of vetting that you said, hey, I'm going to vet you. I would say, and I've said this before, sports is kind of a small fraternity. It's hard to get into, but once you get into it, everybody knows everybody, right? And, for you students, I would say, networks make a huge difference because if you're not known, it becomes really hard because there are so many other people who are known and are considered, really good people. And if I threw out a couple of names, you would probably react like, oh, I really like that guy, or, oh, she's really great, right? And
who you trust.
It is.
Networking often gets confused with self-promotion, and you don't have to use LinkedIn of like, oh, I achieved this today, and because that makes people uncomfortable sometimes selfishly, but building that network and relating to people, that's definitely a big part.
Well, thank you for your time today. I finish up with my podcast just saying to the students, hey, you're the quarterback of your career. And this podcast and the guests that I have on here are here to help you make the best game plan for you to succeed. So thanks again, Matt, for being on. And
love talking to you, Steve.
Good to see you. Hopefully we'll continue to keep in touch now that the Olympics are over. But thanks for your time.
Thank you. See you soon.